Hello, and welcome to another episode of the AgNext Podcast, where we are always excited to tell you what is next from AgNext. Today, we have another very special guest, Libby Bigler, who is the Colorado Beef Quality Assurance BQA Coordinator.
Let's get into it. Libby, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, how you ended up in this role?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a guest on the podcast today. So I am actually a Colorado native, born and raised in Colorado. Grew up kind of not in agriculture, but close to it. I was in a rural community. And so I got involved in 4-H when I was young and really got involved in the livestock judging program in 4-H. And so that's where I kind of decided, okay, I need to get into animal sciences. I went to Northwest College in Powell, Wyoming for my associate's degree, and I competed on a livestock judging team there, spent 2 years there and got an Associates of Science in Animal Sciences, and then always knew I was going to come back and be a CSU Ram through and through. That was the thing. So I transferred in and worked on an animal science bachelor's and actually added a second bachelor's. I also have a degree in journalism and technical communications from CSU. And so my goal was to go into ag communications. And my first job out was I was the director of communications and youth activities for the American Brahman Breeders Association.
Oh,
so
wow.
I spent a year there with the Brahman Association in Houston. And so, yeah, Pedro, you know about Brahman cattle pretty well.
About that.
Yeah.
How fun.
Yeah, it was different. I hadn't seen, through livestock judging, I had judged Brahmins at the Houston contest or whatever, but really the only other time I'd seen Brahman cattle was at National Western Stock Show. They have that bull that you can ride on and you can take your picture with it. And that was the most of my experience before having that first job out of college. So it was a great experience, and it also was useful in leading me into my second job after the Brahman Association. I worked in membership for National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and I covered the southeast part of the U.S. where Brahman cattle are more prevalent. And so I was able to, connect better with the producers in that area as a membership manager at NCBA. And then I spent 3 years with them, and then this BQA job came open at CSU. And so I actually thought this job was going to be something that I was going to recommend to my husband. I was like, yeah, Bo, you'd be great at this.
Sure.
And I looked at it again and I'm like, wait a minute. I would be great at this. And so I came to CSU in the fall of 2015. So I'm going on 9 years here as the BQA state coordinator.
It doesn't seem that long ago.
It doesn't.
I remember when you told me we were working together at NCBA that you were leaving, I was crushed. But I was so excited for you. That doesn't feel like it was 9 years ago.
It really has. I've grown into this position and realized that I do enjoy education and producer education. Rather than going around the country and trying to get people to join a membership organization, which is super valuable. And I'll always promote joining membership associations and NCBA and Colorado Cattlemen's. But that really wasn't my skill set. I made myself do those things, and I worked hard to recruit members and get them to pay me money. But really, I prefer providing the service to them in this role as BQA state coordinator and providing the opportunity to get them certified in something that's so important to our industry for everybody to understand and have that foundational knowledge. So I really love my job, and this job has evolved as well. So it's not just going out and training producers. There's a number of things that the program has grown into that I've been able to help build, and that makes me proud to be part of that. So.
That's cool. So you went to Wyoming, came to Colorado, and then how long were you in Texas?
Only for a year. For a
year, and then the NCBA was here in Colorado, back in Colorado.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that also helped. I'm one of those homebodies. I haven't been one to want to move away from family, and so I'm lucky being born and raised in Colorado, where we have National Cattlemen's, we have CSU here, we have JBS, right? So a lot of the industry is right here in our state, and I've been able to build my career around that.
That's really good. So you mentioned a little bit about your role as a BQA coordinator. I will ask you two questions in the same question. So what do you do, and can you expand what is a BQA and what service that it provides to producers and community?
Yeah, so the BQA program is a nationally coordinated, state-implemented producer education program that trains cattle producers on best management practices that will really influence the outcomes in meat quality. So we want to make sure that we're training cattle producers on things that really enhance the quality of their product when it comes out the other end at the processors. And so those things, I think when most people think of BQA, they always think about giving shots, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the core, the foundational, one of the first BQA guidelines was give shots in the neck, change your needle, all of those things. Yes. But we do tons of research that informs BQA guidelines, whether it's meat quality research, whether it's on-farm production research. And there's a BQA advisory group that meets twice a year that looks at that research and says, what can we now add to BQA that we know that's based in science that can help us train producers about XYZ that will have some sort of good outcome in terms of quality. And then that ultimately leads to consumer acceptance and trust in our product. And so that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. My job is to go out and train cattle producers on these best management practices and get them certifications. And it could be any segment of the industry. I can go to a feedlot one day and I can go to a county cattlemen's meeting the next day and train cow-calf producers or stockers. Or like you guys, you have me out and have your research group get BQA certified because you're handling cattle and giving shots and all of those things all the time. So the way that I may train might be a little bit different depending on the industry segment, but the core concepts of BQA are the same and they're foundational across the country. So whether I train it here in Colorado or my counterpart in Pennsylvania trains a producer, it's the same components, it's the same principles across the board. So if you're certified in Pennsylvania, it is an equivalent to being certified in Colorado.
In fact, there's also a possibility to take the training online as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people like to do it in person. Really in person, it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's more interactive. You can ask questions. You're going to see different versions of maybe how I like to present something or different photos of different types of defects or whatever that is. People like to do it in person because you can get it out of the way in an hour and a half or 2 hours. But for those that can't get to a training or prefer to do it more self-led, you can do it free at bqa.org 24/7 anytime. And the reason that it's free is because the BQA program is funded by the beef checkoff. So if you pay your checkoff dollar, this is one of the programs that we provide back to the producer. And most of the checkoff goes towards consumer education and promotion and building beef demand on the consumer end. But the checkoff feels that BQA is important enough as kind of an insurance policy that they want to put money into the program so that we can ensure that all of the producers are doing these fundamentals, which will ultimately enhance consumer demand in beef.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So your trainings for our group are just absolutely wonderful. Our students love them. Our faculty loves them. They learn how to give shots. You've gone through actually appropriate handling practices with us. Every time we attend, we do this every year, as you mentioned, I feel like our students learn something and we learn something, even if it is the same core principles. How do producers contact you for an in-person training if they have interest?
Yeah. It's as easy as just sending me an email or giving me a phone call. And so you can find all that contact information online. I do have a state BQA website, so it's cobqa.org. You can also find each state's contact information for your specific trainer or your coordinator in your state at the national BQA website, which is bqa.org.
And every state has a coordinator.
Almost every state has a dedicated coordinator.
That's amazing.
We have coordinators in, I think, 46 states.
Wow. Incredible.
There's some places in the country, you all know, there's more people than cattle. And so they kind of combine regionally. The northeastern part of the country has someone that's a contact in that area. But otherwise, it's, 46 states have committed BQA state coordinator.
The other day I was even chatting with Libby about that because I was in a meeting in Mexico and the Mexican producers were asking me how can they get the BQA trained for Mexican employees, which was pretty cool too.
The reputation, knowing it across, international reputation for a BQA program. Other countries do have similar probably equivalent programs. Canada has a verified beef production program. I don't know the specific name of the one in Australia. And of course, in Europe, in the European Union, they have even stricter regulations than we have. So they're not going to have this kind of producer-driven program, which is what BQA is. It's producer-driven. It's by us and for us. They're going to have a more regulated type of program that they have to abide by to have market access. But BQA gives people a different level of market access, I guess. There are packers that require BQA from their feedlot suppliers. It's not mandatory from a regulatory standpoint, but packers see the value in it.
Sure.
It reduces their risk, right? And some feedlots, of course, they're going to pay premiums for cattle coming in that can verify that they're BQA certified and have taken additional steps to ensure that their cattle are ready for the feedlot and going to do better when they're there. So the supply chain sees the value in BQA as well.
Absolutely. I'm really curious. You mentioned that you're constantly evolving the program and working to incorporate new research, even that you've helped build new aspects of BQA. What are some of those newer programs that producers might not be familiar with, let's say if they haven't attended a BQA training in a few years?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have new components of BQA. I think most people think about giving shots as the number one.
Sure.
People even joke with me about giving shots. And I'm not funny anymore. I've been doing this for 9 years, but they'll joke with me. But of course, we talk about how to use antibiotics. That's one of those core components as well, judicious use and those kind of things. You mentioned, Kim, that we talk about cattle handling. That's become a newer part of the program that people don't necessarily think about, but there are a lot of carcass defects that we can cause by adding additional stress or, maybe misuse of facilities or just putting pressure unintentionally on cattle that we don't realize we're doing. So we do talk a lot about stockmanship and cattle handling. Some of the newer things that we've put a bigger emphasis on lately, and it's worked really well because of COVID, I'll say. We had a global pandemic that people had to think about how to keep themselves healthy and biosecurity. And so we're able to use that outbreak in human health as a way to put more emphasis on biosecurity in our cattle operations.
Wonderful.
And as you all know, a huge threat of something foreign animal disease like FMD, it's nice to be able to have the foundational principles of biosecurity in our BQA program so that folks can at least have some level of understanding of biosecurity in the instance that something scary like FMD were to come across our borders.
Absolutely.
So biosecurity is a big thing that we talk about now. And we actually call it what it is, biosecurity. We're not just talking about vaccines and, quarantining cattle before they come into all of those things. We're actually saying this is biosecurity. You need to have a biosecurity plan in place, and it should include these components, right? Some other new things that we talk about, we've added things like emergency action planning. We've added things like worker safety, just some basics of worker safety, because you need to have a healthy, safe crew to make sure that they're taking the best care of the cattle.
Or family.
Or family, absolutely.
Sure, absolutely.
And then we also have started including, which very of interest to you all, some basic components of environmental quality control points to think about. That's a little more challenging to talk about if you're not a true kind of expert in those areas.
Sure.
But if we're talking to a cow-calf audience, we'll talk more about appropriate utilization of land resources and thinking about grazing strategies, a few of those things. We don't get in the weeds about it, but something to be on their radar because we do need to think about maintaining our resources so that we can use them in the future. We also talk a little bit on feedlots about, dust mitigation or those kind of things that might have something to do with environment as well. And
is this something I was going to ask exactly probably very similar questions to Kim, like how you've seen that's the BQA evolving over time and maybe on the 9 years that you've been there. Do you feel that these questions about biosecurity, workers, sustainability now, and is this something that's driven by producers, consumers? Who are the people, hey, let's implement this into the BQA training?
I think it's a combination, but I will say that we're very responsive to research on consumer preferences and what they want, because we understand that if we don't have consumers that are willing to purchase and prefer to purchase our products, we're going to have some challenges in the industry, and that's sustainability of our industry. That's a lot of things. So we're very responsive to that consumer research. And so when the advisory committee meets, if we have updates from the folks that do kind of consumer research that say, okay, this percentage of consumers thinks that sustainability is animal welfare, we add more animal welfare to our BQA program so that we can educate producers to make sure that we have a response to those consumers that want to know about welfare and are concerned about it, right? So we are very responsive to what we hear on the consumer side of things. But at the same time, I will credit the producers in the industry because they know that we have to do these things. We have to add these components to our BQA program so that we have everything covered. We have our bases covered, and that anybody that wants to get into the industry or anybody that wants to have some continuing education and reach out to the university to get trained on BQA is up to date on those new things that are important in the beef quality assurance program.
And the producers have been good in response to that. Do you feel that they usually are open to receive that?
Yes.
Different topics, that it's not only vaccination or other things.
Yes, I think so. I think that actually adds a level of value to them because, you know, a lot of people know about BQA. BQA started like when I was born, Pedro. I mean, it was the program was in place in the late 80s. And so the people that got on board with it, they've been certified. Your certification lasts 3 years. So we expect people to go every 3 years and get recertified. And some people say, well, I did it and it's the same thing, right? I did it for 6 years, and I feel like I know all there is to know about what you're going to provide me for BQA. Well, now as we start to change and we start to respond to consumers and we realize, okay, we have a need to add a transportation program, which we haven't talked about yet. Yeah. We can add those transportation components. We can add those, welfare components. We can add in environmental components. And then it's not the same thing over and over. And they're getting more value for it. And a BQA certification means more than just, I can prove I know how to give shots.
Absolutely. And I think that's just great leadership from the BQA advisory committee and others who are involved, that this program can really be a continuing education program, but also a great proof point for consumers who have questions about the way that cattle are raised.
Absolutely.
Tell us about the transportation program.
Sure. Let's see. I think it was 2017 is when the national program said we need something specific for transporters. That was a component of the industry that we hadn't reached yet.
Sure. A
very important component, right? Because that's from the time they get on the truck to the time they exit the truck. It doesn't matter where they're being transported to. If it's from the ranch to the feedlot, if it's from the feedlot to the packer, there are a lot of things that can happen in that time. And what we've realized is that professional drivers may have been driving and hauling cattle their whole lives, but they may have not ever had training on cattle handling. Or there's a new kind of group of professional haulers who really like the idea of this freedom of over the road and hauling cattle. And they think, okay, we're just going to be driving a truck. And then they realize that they actually have to get out and load cattle, and they have to open gates and unload cattle. And I mean,
it's very high stress.
It is.
And high risk from a safety perspective.
Absolutely. And so in 2017, BQA rolled out with its first version of the BQA transportation program, or we call it BQAT. And packers now require the cattle haulers that drop cattle off at the plants to verify their BQA transportation, BQAT status. So those drivers carry a little card around with them in their, in the dash of their truck or whatever. And when they get in the scale house or wherever, they show that card and verify. Because and that program is less about antibiotics and herd health.
Sure, of course.
Veterinary client-patient relationship, those things. It's more about cattle handling, low stress, driving technique, what to do in case of an emergency, if they, over the road, those kind of things, that can help reduce risk for them and improve their safety, but also improve the safety and the well-being of the cattle as they are over the road.
And do you recommend, so in Colorado, of course, we have ranchers that are taking cattle from their home ranch up to leased ground, and oftentimes they're in semis and whatnot. Do you recommend they take the BQAT program as well, or is it more for professional type haulers?
That's a great question. We also have a BQAT program. It's BQAT, but we call it the farmer rancher track.
So that's wonderful.
You can add it on easily to a BQA training. So if you drive a semi, or even if you do feed out a few fats or something, and you do have to take them to the packer, and they want you to see BQAT, the farmer rancher training will qualify for that as well. So
that's wonderful.
It adds like an additional 30 minutes onto a basic BQA training. It's not the full professional driver training, and it doesn't hit on the exact same things, but the general concept of it is the same.
Great.
So that's a really good really good question. And there's that differentiation there. It counts as the same thing, but our content is just delivered a little bit differently depending on who that audience is.
That's wonderful.
That might be something that we probably can add to our training.
I know,
because
probably. Not that we drive semis, but we do load
cattle.
trucks. Yeah.
And and that's a big component.
And it's stressful.
It is.
I mean, it's stressful for the cattle, it's stressful for the humans, and it's
especially
dangerous.
for us, like we are doing a research, we spend this whole amount of time invest and everything, and we can do something wrong in the last day. So
yes,
we want
exactly.
to avoid that.
Exactly. And that's, I think, sometimes what some of the research was showing. You know, if you look at the National Beef Quality Audit, we get a lot of data from the National Beef Quality Audit that helps inform Beef Quality Assurance Program. And in the 2016 quality audit and the most recent 2022 quality audit, we're seeing higher instances of bruising. Maybe not as severe, but definitely more bruises.
interesting.
And, you know, it's hard to age bruises. And you could talk to Dr. Edwards Calloway about that.
Yeah.
That's one of her
Sure.
specialties. It's hard to age them, but we do know that if those bruises are pretty bright purple, it probably happened in
Recently.
the last leg of the journey. And there are some things that we're aware of. Cattle are getting bigger.
Yep.
They are. That's how you get paid for cattle is on size and weight. And our infrastructures is staying the same size.
Yeah.
And so
Trucks are the same size. The
trucks
plants are the same size.
Absolutely. And that
pins are the same size.
yeah, that causes some challenges. And so you can obviously see how bruising could potentially increase because of that. And so we're trying to educate people about that. Like, let's be aware that our cattle are big and our facilities are the same size, and, you know, let's move them slower so that we're not, increasing their likelihood of jumping into that belly of the trailer where they might scrape their backs or things like that.
Sure.
So yeah, those are things that we use to help inform programming. And I think that kind of sparked, the 2016 quality audit that said we're having more bruising. We thought, oh, okay, well, we don't have this transporter program. We don't have a way to educate this segment of the industry. Let's put this into place and see if we can see some improvements.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. And you mentioned that the BQA get informed by the National Quality Beef Audit, right? Every 5-ish years.
Yeah, National Beef Quality Audit is 5 years.
What are the things that you've seen that came out in this last one that you were not seeing the previous years? Is there some things that are pointing out and you think that's worth just mentioning?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is good that this is going this direction. I didn't expect it. Yeah. But of course, we talked about bruising. The newest thing that is a big challenge for our industry that we are finding in the quality audit is something we don't want to have to talk about, but we have to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And that is the instances of foreign material in beef that are ranch origin. And what I'm actually talking about is how often we're finding bird shot in beef. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I somehow have been dubbed the unofficial birdshot educator of the country, not the country, but
I think the last time I heard you present on this, you were going to work with Ducks Unlimited, a hunting organization, to also work on training the hunting community around cattle grazing and whatnot.
Yeah, this is a hard thing to fix because we're seeing National Beef Quality Audit. 100% of the coal, cow, and bull plants said that they have issues with bird shot. 100% of them. 50%, nearly 50, 49% of the fed plants said that they're still seeing bird shot in beef. And so who better than the BQA program to educate producers, right? Because it's a live animal side. We don't know how it's getting in there. We don't know if it is hunters.
Sure.
We don't know if it is, for lack of better terms, and I've been using this term, hooligans, people that are out shooting signs and shooting cows. And we also don't know for certain if it's not maybe some of those bad actors in the industry that, bad has become normal for them in the words of Dr. Grandin, bad becoming normal. And so we know it's happening, but we don't know how. And so one of the things that we're doing here at CSU are some mini kind of pilot research projects where we're doing focus groups on hunters to talk to them, Ducks Unlimited, those folks, to talk to them about their interactions with cattle when they are hunting, bird hunting specifically, to get their experiences. We're not obviously trying to like point fingers and say,
no, of course not.
You guys are doing this, but we know that people do hunt in the same areas that cattle are on, right? Whether it's, public land or even private land. And
maybe these focus groups will allow you to rule the hunters out, right? And then focus differently maybe on educating community members or
somewhere else. Yes, exactly.
Bad actors.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those challenging things, but there's so much more research we can do on it.
Sure.
We could do research and talk about how close you have to be to penetrate a hide, or, we could have the plants.
Not with a live animal.
Right, not with a live animal. Good point.
Never with a live animal. We could test this
not.
on not a live animal.
Yes. We can get hides from the plant, and yes. We can do that. We could ask plants to collect and maintain the shot that they're getting, and we can see what size of shot,
where it's coming from, who might be using
absolutely.
it. Sure.
So there's a lot of things we can do, but we have to take that first step, and identifying, what, is hunting a big contributor to this factor?
Sure.
And the old BQA manual didn't say a lot about it, but did say, make sure that you, are not using a shotgun as a handling device. Mm-hmm. Okay, first and foremost. Secondly, if you're running cattle on public land and there are hunters in the area, educate hunters.
Sure.
And then third, if you can, don't run cattle in areas where there's going to be hunters. And so 2 of the 3 bullet points made kind of an assumption that it was hunting, but we don't have the data on that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working towards, is getting some data, trying to help solve this problem, because when those plants find it, they don't have that connection point back to the live animal necessarily. You probably could get there a roundabout long way, but it's easier for a group like BQA to educate, our trainer network, and then send our trainer network out to the producers and say, hey, this is a problem. You may not have been aware of it.
Sure.
And then they can also spread that word around, and hopefully we can make some positive impact that way.
Absolutely.
That's pretty good. On the positives, let's say prevention or long term, how do you see BQA? You've mentioned that you do a lot of trainings to our sustainability group, and how do you see BQA contributing to sustainability in the long term? Oh,
I think this is an easy answer. We'll see if I can make it sound easy. BQA is fundamental. We have to be doing these foundational things to ensure the sustainability of our industry. If we are doing things that are not the most efficient and most effective and the best for animal welfare, we do not have long-term success, right? We do not sustain our industry. And who measures that sustainability? Well, there's a number of ways to measure that, but we always focus on the consumer. If we're responsive to the consumer and the consumer wants to know about how cattle were raised, and we don't have a good answer to that, they're going to stop eating beef. And then ultimately, there's so many more negatives there. If we can tell them we have this great story, people are bought in, people are certified, they raise their cattle under BQA standards, and we can share that messaging with consumers, and they feel confident that their beef is being raised in a way that they understand and that they can connect with, that is going to really enhance the sustainability of the industry, because we'll have beef demand. Beef demand is going to help sustain the industry. I think there's other components, obviously. Our industry is not going to be sustainable if we overgraze and have no land to raise cattle on, right? Or whatever. That's as basic of terms as we can get on. But there's so many layers of things that have to be done correctly to sustain our industry. And this is one of those layers. If we don't do this right, that pulls a peg out of our little Jenga cube,
absolutely,
and it could collapse. And that's where I see BQA playing a role into the future from a sustainability perspective.
And the continuous education piece, I think, is just so incredible.
I should say, in terms of continuous education, that is a pillar of BQA. And we did talk about this earlier, Pedro, how do you get certified? How often can you do it online? For those people that still feel like BQA is the same thing over and over, we have recently implemented a continuing education platform online where you can get recertified just by taking CE modules. So if you're already certified and your certification is coming up to expire, next year, you can go through and take 1-hour modules just specific on biosecurity or specific on stockmanship and get recertified. So that's in awesome. That spirit of continuous education. And if you feel that you are confident in the fact that you follow label instructions on your antibiotics and use them judiciously and know how to give shots and are doing those things well and don't necessarily need that reminder, you can focus more on
the things that are new.
Yes. And transport is part of that. So you can take the transportation certification in addition to 2 other CE modules to get 3 credits and get recertified that way online.
So we've learned about 3 different ways to get certified. There's an in-person certification, there's an online certification, and then there's additional continuing education online certification where 3 units, 3 hours worth gets you recertified.
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah. And I prefer the in-person.
Oh, Libby does such a great job. I'm going to put a plug in for her, but she's incredible.
I think last time that we had, she was talking for about an hour and a half, and it feels like 10 minutes.
It's so good.
I'm glad that you say that, because when I'm up there for an hour and a half, it doesn't feel like 10 minutes.
It's so good.
There's a lot to squeeze in that hour and a half. And one of the cool things that we can do, and hopefully we'll do this with you guys this year, is add some live cattle, shoot side demonstrations that break up that monotony of maybe just sitting in a classroom for an hour and a half. So don't let that, if you're listening and you want to get certified, there are options with the in-person training as long as we have that ability to, do something shoot side or bring in cattle.
We'll bring the extras up.
In our case, we always have new students, so I think that creates a value to the more experienced students, but also the new students. For a new producer who wants to get into the certified business or getting certified BQA, how does that usually work? Like, do they reach out to you? Is there somebody else that they would connect? Like, and how you've seen young farmers get into it as well?
I think most of the young people that are getting involved, it's hard to get that direct connection with them. So I work really closely with our state's cattlemen's associations and producer groups, and that's where I do a lot of the advertising and promotion. So if you're new in the industry and want to get BQA certified, you can always follow me on Facebook, or check out cobqa.org. There's always updates there. But if they didn't, hopefully people will know if they're listening to this, go there. But if you don't, stay involved with your local cattlemen's associations and the state cattlemen's associations, and they do a lot of advertising and promotion for BQA. And if you come to those conventions or county meetings, there should be some BQA presence in the area to ask more questions, see when the next training is, those kind of things.
Wonderful. Yeah. Libby, you're such an incredible young professional, a woman as well in the industry, in a very tough area where you're educating men mostly in the industry. So absolutely inspired by your career and all that you've achieved. How has mentorship been important for you in your career?
Oh, thank you for that, Kim. That's kind words. And it is, this job is a challenge. I didn't come from ag, and I'm going out to educate ranchers that are 5th generation ranchers on things that they've done their whole life that maybe I haven't had the same experiences, the actual experiences on the ground that they have. And so it is that's a challenge. It's an intimidation piece. And so we've learned to kind of, get through that and connect with those people, one-on-one, rather than just, I know everything that you should be doing and I don't know what you're doing. So I really appreciate that. I have needed mentorship to get to where I am. And I think that that's something that people need to be open to. You can't do it on your own. I can't go out there on day one and just expect that people will come to BQA trainings and will care and get certified and maintain their certification. You have to have those mentors in the industry. And what's really been helpful for me, I will say, is the connections with the state cattlemen's and county cattlemen's associations. And also, I mentioned that this program's funded by the Beef Checkoff. The Colorado Beef Council has a board of directors that are all, producers or processors, people that play a big role in the industry, and they support this program. And so the individual connections with them and reaching out to those members on the board at the Colorado Beef Council has been, those folks have been mentors to me, or even, the exec of the Colorado Beef Council or the exec of CCA and CLA. They've really helped mentor me through those areas. The other thing that I do need to I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is the mentorship here at CSU. CSU is one of the original proponents and creators of the Beef Quality Assurance Program. Dr. Keith Belk, for instance, has been on every national beef quality audit there that has been conducted. And the National Beef Quality Audits really led to forming the BQA program. And so without the support of the Department of Animal Sciences at CSU and faculty members that have been involved in National Beef Quality Audit and BQA, I don't think I could be as successful in this position as I have been. And so aligning yourself with the people, that whether it's, academia that have done the research to get to where we are, or, being mentored by people in the industry that are generational ranchers that understand these, this is how this really works from a practical standpoint, and being able to change that messaging to really connect with the people that I'm serving has been so important and valuable in this role.
I'm sure your diverse background helps, and also the journalism.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true. I will say, maybe you wouldn't realize this, but I am a big time introvert. I would rather sit in my office with the door closed, and that's how I gain energy. And so it takes some true ramping up to like go out and present in front of an audience or teach a class or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so this, like, learning the actual skills to be a good communicator is really important to me, because I'm not just naturally a good communicator, and I have to like think to myself, this is how I have to present myself. This is how I have to, all the things to make sure that I can do those things well.
No, you do a really good job. And I can't finish without asking you, because you also teach a class here at CSU.
I do.
We have students who are listening to us. Just can you let us know, like, what are the classes and when do you teach them, how to assign for the class and things like that?
Yeah. Oh, because we have a student audience that watches.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, cool. So I teach ANEQ 300L. It's an applied 2-credit class. It's called Topics in Animal Science Quality Assurance. Kim actually is going to be a guest lecturer in it, so thank you so much. Mm-hmm. It's called Quality Assurance. It is top to bottom BQA. I mean, we don't just say this is what you got to do. We talk about the why and when and how, all of the background of BQA, and then even beyond that, why it's important. Mm-hmm. And that's why, I have Kim come in and talk about why BQA is important to sustainability. I have, Packers come in and talk about why they're bought into BQA. I talk about the beef checkoff and understand some of those industry components that are important for students to understand. They might graduate here with an animal science degree and are able to formulate a ration, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
But sometimes they get out there, hopefully. Sometimes they get out there and they don't understand the industry dynamics. They don't understand the beef supply chain. They don't know what the beef checkoff is. And so I try to bring that into this class as well, because there's so many things that connect in that BQA can kind of branch out into and help them understand the beef industry. It's only taught in the fall. So once a year, 2 credits in the fall, and it's Monday, Wednesday class, but I really enjoy it. I also get to take them to the Kuhner feedlot.
Oh, fun.
Which that helps put the pieces together. Mm-hmm. I have those students do a BQA feedlot assessment, not at Kuhner, but we put the pieces together, and then they go to Kuhner and they see, holy smokes, this is how it really works in the real world. And it's really raises a lot of eyebrows, and they really get involved. We kind of get an in-depth tour, because I've got some connections at Kuhner, being my husband manages that cattle department. So it's a good opportunity for students and to show them, largest cattle feeder in the country, and here's how it works. And they're a national BQA award winner. So
that's right.
No
just
better
recently
place.
a national BQA award winner.
A couple years back. Yeah.
So that's amazing.
Cool. And that's why I have Libby coming to my feedlot class.
Absolutely.
To teach about BQA there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just have one more question for you, and it's the one we finish every podcast with. But how do you define sustainability?
I think I know why you guys do this, because everybody has a different definition of sustainability.
Yes. You're right.
Yeah.
She's a quick study.
It's a hard question. I don't like that question, because I'm a perfectionist and I want to give you the perfect answer, but there's not a perfect answer. Yes. And so for me, I think I already kind of mentioned it a little bit. Sustainability means that we're operating our businesses in a way that they will remain viable in a number of ways into the future for future generations. And so obviously, from my perspective, I look at BQA as a huge piece of that. And I say, if we're not doing these things, right, we pull out that Jenga piece, as I mentioned, and everything collapses. And so to me, sustainability is making sure that we are aware of all of the components of running our businesses in the beef industry in a way that we can pass them along, and we're not deteriorating, we're actually improving them. And so I think that it's so important. BQA is about producer education, but we all have to educate, right? A rancher could think that they're operating sustainably, and they may be, but unfortunately there's so many pieces of sustainability. There's so many things. And if we don't get out and say, you are doing great from a BQA standpoint, but there's something here in your books from a financial standpoint that you need to look at, because economic sustainability is just as important as
Absolutely.
Social or environmental sustainability. We have to continually remind people that, yes, if you want this to work in the future, we've got to do a lot of things. And just, for lack of better terms, when we talk about single trait selection, how that doesn't work in the cattle industry. If you're single trait selecting for trying to be sustainable, you probably haven't covered all your bases.
That's absolutely right.
So I don't know if that was a good
perfect answer.
Oh, thanks, Kim. I was going to say, I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but that's how I see it.
It's great.
I thought it was great. Yes.
I agree with you. That's all I can say. Libby, I know you've mentioned this a couple of times in this conversation, but how can people reach out to you and check out how to do a BQA training, just as a final message to everybody who's listening to us?
Probably the best way is online, bqa.org. Once you get there, you can select your state, and then that will funnel you to your state's BQA coordinator. And you can talk to them, you can email them, you can see upcoming events from that website. And at bqa.org, you can also take those online modules if that's the method that you'd prefer to do your certification.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for being here, Libby. This was just wonderful. And thank you to all our listeners for joining another episode of the AgNext Podcast, where we're always talking about what's next at AgNext. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. And if you have comments, suggestions, feedback that you would like to give us, please send us an email to agnext.colostate.edu, and we'll do our best to answer you as soon as we can.